go. Look at that. What a trout.
That's a nice one.
Yeah, so today I got a rod review I'm doing here today, and that's the first fish on my new rod, and I'm going to share this new model of rods with you. Get your finger out of the way. There you go, because it'll switch lenses. So we'll just take a look at him. What a gorgeous trout. So the rods we're reviewing today, I'm pretty darn excited about, especially for big water fishing like this. Anytime you're throwing weighted flies or 2-fly rigs, it's the new Air 2 Reach from Winston, which I fish a lot of long rods. I think that longer rods for any time you're fishing double fly rigs, indicators, hopper droppers, or tight line fishing, which I happen to be testing the 10-foot 4-weight right now. Now, this rod isn't made specifically for Euro nymphing, but it's made as a crossover rod for more of a Western angler that's going to be using European-style presentation techniques with much bigger flies. And, I'll give you my conclusion kind of at the end of the fishing day, but this rod so far is absolutely killer for throwing big weighted flies, something that a conventional Euro rod wouldn't. I've got a heavily weighted tungsten beadhead, jighead, stonefly nymph on there. Just landed a fabulous trout, but the rod has enough power to actually buck the wind and kick those big heavy flies over, and it makes a great high sticking rod. So we'll review both the 4 and the 5. I actually have the 4, the 5, and the 6 weight in the Air 2 Reach series, and I'll talk a little bit about each one as we go through our fishing day today. Okay, so here's a little background. We're high sticking and fishing that stonefly nymph on a tight line. And that's a shuck from the actual stonefly that's hatching right now, and you can see those others in the background as well. But we get a killer summer stonefly or a nocturnal stonefly hatch on this river. But that's the fly we're fishing right there. That's the Scylla leg stone from Rio Products, tungsten bead, heavy, great fly. Yeah, just line me up where you'd go fishing, man. The bigger current is better, like the swiftest, fastest rocks. Okay. I want to get into, there's a good fish. Look at that. There we go. Just dug him out of there on that same stonefly nymph. Just that, oh, he's gone. Boy, he was in that heavy, heavy current right there. Nice fish. There's one. Oh, lost him again, man. I don't know what's going on. Look at this big sexy rock right here. Just drop her in, put a little tension on it. Maybe a bite. All right, right between the boulders here. Oh, that was a pretty good bite, but he didn't give me much of a chance. Yeah, I think I'll stay right. Right on those rocks, right there, right below the rocks. That's where we want to be. A long cast. This is a good one. Nice, good fish. Good fish. See if I can manage to keep this one on. Just another slab
Nice trout.
that he's already Oh, that was a good fish. That was a really, really good fish, and I hope it shows up on video, but when you're just picking apart those fast rock piles, that high stick, whether it's on a tight line rig or indicator, doesn't matter, but having that reach out there to pick those rocks apart and go from short to long and long to short. And so here we are. Let's talk about rods and why somebody would want one of these Air 2 reaches. The Air 2 reach is simply the Air 2 built in 10-foot lengths. They only make 3 models, the 4, the 5, and the 6. And I think I mentioned this in probably earlier in the video, but this is really for that angler that is going to fish a lot of 2 flies or long leaders and needs to reach and hold drifts in mixed current. This pocket water that we're fishing today with all these swirly boulders and white water is a perfect example of situations where you want to keep your line off the water and high stick. And I'm going to jump in the water and I'm going to show you a few tips on proper high sticking that I've noticed over the years of guiding. There are a few mistakes that are really common that hopefully I can patch up and help you be a better high stick angler. Whether you buy one of these rods from Reds or not, it doesn't matter. Learning to high stick properly is important. The next setup I'm going to fish, and I have fished it a little bit already, that's the 10-foot 5 weight right there. I put a 6 weight line on it. I often do that for longer rods, and this really doesn't need a 6 weight line. I would strongly recommend you just load it up with a standard 5-on-5, or 4-on-4, whatever rig that you want to fish. I'm going to run a single yarn indicator, which is my favorite for high sticking, and I really like fishing a single nymph until I prove that it won't work. But I love high sticking pocket water with these longer rods. It's a really, really fun way to fish. All right, I want to give you a rundown of the rig that I'm fishing on the 10-foot 4 weight. As I mentioned earlier, this is just a 10-foot version of the Air 2. It's designed to throw dry flies, nymphs, streamers, whatever the situation calls for. This rod is much faster to recover than the Super 10 that I wasn't a huge fan of. That was the older version of their 10-foot rods that retired a couple of years ago. They came out with this rod, and this rod at 10 feet has really fast recovery and a lot of feel in the tip. And this thing will tight line fish quite well. I realize that's not for everybody, but if you're that angler who's curious about sliding crayfish and stonefly nymphs, maybe the occasional perdigon along the bottom, and you want that advantage, which I could rant and tell you. In fact, I will. I'll tell you, if you're not doing that and you're a wade fisherman experimenting with mono on a light long rod, you're missing out. It really is a huge advantage, and it's a ton of fun because you get instant connection to the fish. The fine control you have over that presentation for when you're fishing subsurface is incredible. You get rid of that indicator and the control you have is incredible. The problem is, okay, now this is just going to become a rant. The problem is when it comes to tight line fishing or euro nymphing, most people never get over the hump. That was me 15 years ago. I dismissed the technique. I thought, oh, that works for other people, but it's not good enough for me. I'm such a great fisherman. And it took all these years later for me to realize it was a me problem and not an equipment problem. But this rod is capable of throwing. It's not going to be the best contact or euro nymphing rod out there, but if you're going to move big bugs, this thing will move big ass stoneflies and sculpin. I threw a sculpin on it earlier too, and slide them across the bottom. It'll punch them into the wind. It'll punch them into tough pockets. So there's enough touch in that rod tip that we can actually quiver flies along the bottom. But if you want to throw streamers, sink tips, hopper droppers, I mean, the thing would be a killer dry dropper rod. It would be great. But I'm testing it with mono here at the moment. I'm running about 30 feet of 15-pound Maxima Ultra Green. I just grabbed one of my euro nymphing reels, but you could add that to the end of your fly line with a chunk of cider material. That's 1X cider material, that bright, funny colored stuff. I got a tippet ring down to, I was fishing 2X actually to that big stonefly nymph, which is heavier than I normally fish, but I wanted to just do some casting and test the rod. But I'm actually going to fish some perdigons on it and try to pick a couple of trout out of the pockets. But this rod is capable of doing a little bit of everything. Comparing the 4 to the 5, I think if I had to buy one for trout specific purposes, and trout would be anywhere from 10 to 20 inches, I'm going to go with the 10-foot 4. The 5 weight really plays pretty heavy, That's going to be more of my Montana style brown trout rig. Deschutes River, big indicators, big stonefly nymphs. The 10-foot 5-weight would probably be a better match for that, but I think the 4-weight will keep fish pinned with smaller flies better. Just my instinct. Now on the 5-weight, the way I've rigged up the 5-weight is I've got just a yarn indicator. I just tied in some New Zealand strike indicator yarn right there and tied that in, and I've got a hinge leader system, which I love. I've done other videos on how to use a tippet ring and create a hinge, and that allows me to fish really short and light. And I'm an avid high stick nympher. I like to fish pocket water. I like to fish short line nymph rigs. I don't like to drag the bottom. I want my indicator set at the average depth of what I'm going to be fishing, and then I don't move my indicator a lot. Throughout the course of a day, I'm going to snap off once in a while. I might even tangle once in a while. I'm human like everyone else. At that time, if I broke off because I was snagging bottom, I'll shorten it up a bit when I tie a new fly on or add a piece of tippet. But that tippet ring connection allows me to just run, say, 2 to 3 feet down to a single nymph, and I'm going to go fish this pocket water behind me with this yellow spot nymph and do a whole bunch of high sticking where I can keep my fly line elevated all out of those fast swirls. But that's my rig on the 10-foot 5-weight. Let me show you a couple of tips on proper high sticking techniques. So let's talk a little bit about high sticking. Deadly technique, a couple things to know. It's a short range technique, really good for mixed currents where I can get close to the fish, meaning there's whirlpools, there's swirls, there's all sorts of action happening. You can take a look out here and you can see there's lots of boulders, lots of mixed currents. A lot of places for fish to hide. Okay, so things I see people do incorrectly with high sticking. One, they try to high stick exclusively across or even downstream from them. It does not work very well. We're trying to create a perfectly drag-free drift. So rule number 1 is we really have to go. Sometimes you can go across, but you really want to go upstream. And I'm going to go ahead and make an upstream cast, and my rod is going to go down to the water. I'm going to strip in line, and I'm going to lift my rod as the fly comes towards myself like this. As it gets across from me, I'm going to lower it back down. I could feed line a little bit at the end of the high stick, not necessary right here. I'm just taking small bites of this. The other thing that's absolutely critical to be a good high stick fisherman, I see this mistake all the time. It drives me insane. You want to see me get mad and grouchy and provide passive aggressive instruction? High stick like this. It's the dumbest thing in the world. You can't do that. I don't see fishermen that I admire their skill set that hold the line like this when high sticking. You need to be able to strip the line in and maintain the same rod angle. I want you to watch this next drift closely. So I stripped in a ton of line right there without jeopardizing my rod position. It floats across from me, and then I lower it down as it goes. But you want to keep the line in your rod hand when you're high sticking. That way when I hook a fish, I've got control of it like so. I've got control of the line right here, and I can strip into just the right amount. Now when it comes to how much line you have on your water, part of the reason a longer rod is good, one, you have more reach to hold that indicator or that hopper dropper out there, whatever you're fishing. High sticking is generally a nymphing technique, but you can do it with a dry fly. Longer leaders are going to be an advantage. This line being heavy has a lot of sag in it. So when my rod tip goes out, I want a nice clean connection between my indicator and my rod tip because I want to keep as much line off the water as I can. If I have a longer distance between my fly line and my strike indicator, I can get a cleaner presentation. It's just better. It's light, thin mono. Gravity doesn't pull it down, hence pulling the indicator back towards myself. So longer leaders are good. I run, here, I've got 6 feet between my indicator and my fly line. I see people put their indicator right near the end of their fly line all the time. That's a huge mistake. Easy to cast, hard to get a fish doing that. And then I've got about 3 feet of leader below my indicator for a total of about 9 feet on my leader. But I'm just gonna fish for a moment here, just kind of live, and I want you to watch how my hands work, the angle my rod's at, and just pay attention to kind of the posture where my rod and my hands are. There we go, big fish. Oh, that's a damn nice one. Yeah, it was right above me. Oh yeah. Oh, he's on a small fly. Oh, dang. Oh, don't go out there. Don't go out there. Please don't go out there. Okay, if you can hear me, a couple of tips about fighting fish on light line and heavy current. This is one of the few situations I want my rod tip high, just so that I don't get a ton of line in that fast current. Normally I like a pretty low rod angle. Oh, come on. Glad I got the 5-weight right here. That's a heck of a trout. Okay, we're gonna turn him in now. Come on. Oh, I got him. Oh, yeah. On that little mouse jig. What a fish. Oh. Boy, he splashed the camera pretty good. Hey, that was awesome. That was just a short little cast up there behind those rocks. And I will tell you, I am super glad I had the fighting butt on there, because netting that fish was very difficult. I got him to swim downstream towards me, which was, I'd hoped to have that happen to lift him up, get his head, and then have him come downstream into the net. But that fighting butt came in really handy there. I had that thing just dug into my elbow. So anyway, super nice trout. I'm gonna work up a hair longer and see if I can't get another one. There we go. Up there. Tiny pocket. Yeah, fish was right in there. There you go. Nice. We'll take it. Another one. Right in that little green spot right there. High stick, high stick, high stick. Okay, a couple quick thoughts on the 5-weight. Big old fighting butt that came in handy, as I might have mentioned. Roll caster's dream. I did snag my back cast in the tree once or twice, then I really went to a roll cast after that. But you can see there's a lot of brush, you know, up along the bank there, but I think a little longer rod helps keep your back cast above that. But the roll cast with 10-footer was great. You can do a bunch of this with 9-footers too. But one thing I want to leave you with in regards to just high sticking, because that's kind of the, you know, the profound advantage of a longer rod, is there is a huge difference between folks who think they're doing it right and are doing it right. And it's very subtle. But if that indicator's walking sideways in the current, that's bad juju. That fly's not gonna sink, it's not gonna suspend. When you're high sticking, the goal is to draw that nymph directly under your strike indicator, whatever type of strike indicator that is. And you can only do that with that really nice, subtle touch where there's just enough tension to keep the line out of the water, but not so much that indicator's walking sideways across the current towards you. So it's very subtle. Look at your drifts critically. Hopefully, if you've already been presenting flies like that, you look at it a little bit differently and try to get that balance just right so that you can get that fly to suck up under the indicator, really suspend, and give that illusion of a completely neutral buoyancy like an insect when it's hovering downstream. Okay, so here I got a big TJ hooker on. And one of my favorite ways to fish is I'll dead stick it through some of the rock piles, but then I'll just strip it like a streamer. And this rod casts that rig on mono, crazy accurate. And I can just pick it up and fire it anywhere in here. So there's a rock, I'll just go to a traditional nymph style drift right behind the rock. Same for that boulder right there. Then if I want to strip it like a streamer, I can. Strip it like a streamer. There was a grab. What a hookup! He was under that log. Oh, that was awesome. Yeah, we might need to tuck into the bank. What a hookup. Yeah, he was under that log. I just dead stick that streamer right along that log. Yeah, he got hit by an osprey, I think, or a heron. Beautiful. Got him. Oh, that was such a good hookup. Nice. That gets my juices going right there. Hell of a trout. Got him on this little streamer. I'm just gonna let him swim. There we go.
Nice fish, bro.
So yeah, I got him on this little streamer. We'd been playing around with stoneflies, and this is one that I tied. And actually, it's a squirrel jig that I tied, and my son actually shot and tanned the squirrel that one's made with. But that fish was right up against a log, and I had to just jam that cast right in there and then hover that streamer right along the log, and that fish came out from under the log and hammered it. I feel like if I'd been casting and stripping the streamer, he wouldn't have come all the way out. I had to hold it in there nice and tight. But I gotta say, this is the rod I've been looking for. I've been ranting about it while we've been fishing. But finally, a really fast action rod that will throw those streamers against the bank on mono like that. I know mono fishing isn't for everybody, but this rod equally will throw hopper droppers. It'll roll cast, it'll throw indicators, it'll throw a dry fly if you need to. It's the same as the Air 2, just longer, but with the fighting butt addition there. And for my style, this rod is just, yeah, this is what I've been looking for kind of that Western style, you know, mono streamer, mono stonefly nymph fishing. I could not be happier with this. This is the 10-foot 4-weight. The 5 is not going to be able to cast those light mono rigs quite the way the 4-weight is, but yeah, I'm super satisfied with this rod, as you can tell. All right, we got Paul on a good one on the streamer here. Oh, he's moving around the back of the boat. Nice job, Paul. How'd that take feel? All right, same rig, just running that mono rig with that streamer. We'll net him in the shallows over here. Nice fish. Downstream from us. I'll go on the attack. All right, beautiful. Beautiful. Awesome. Okay, a couple more words just about that rig we're fishing. One thing I really like about this style has gone from like a rod review to like a technique instructional, is you could fish those really little streamers and you can get them down deep because you're gonna dead drift them and then lead them through on a little bit of tension. You still get to feel the grab and all that, but you could fish those little streamers with small hooks, and I think those fish eat more of the small streamers, and then those small hooks are just easy on the trout. So versus, you know, throwing a big number 2 dolly or something like that. That fish was just perfectly hooked to the upper lip, you know, much like a nymph hookup, and yeah, we got a good rush out of it. The other thing, like the difference, you know, in like what I found today and what Paul's experiencing, this is his first time throwing that tight line streamer rig. Good fun?
Yeah, super good fun, yeah. You make it look pretty easy though. It's trickier than it looks, but I'm game to learn how to do it. It's effective for sure.
It's really fast paced, you know. We'll do it wading too, but we could do it out of the boat as well. So it's really fast. You can cycle your cast back in. Like if you like streamer fishing, you know, you can consider this. But having that's the first rod I fished where it's fast enough to respond, unlike a dedicated or purpose-built like tight line or contact rod. That rod is fast enough, man. It fires that streamer or that stonefly or that crayfish, whatever it is. It fires it in with really good velocity so you can actually hit the pockets, and that's a big difference. It's not as touchy for like fishing little perdigons and stuff like that. I don't think it's a great choice for that, but it's a very good choice for the person who wants to tight line fish some larger flies and give themselves a profound advantage. All right, it wouldn't be right to do this rod review without a couple of tips on roll casting or handling situations where you have a lot of grass and brush behind you. And there are a couple of different ways I deal with this situation. One of which is I can just throw my line downstream toward the shore that I'm wading. So I can roll cast it or do it however. Now I can take and turn my body and I can sling that line a great distance upstream. That's a really great way to just set your angle, give it my mend. I fish, the drift runs through, and eventually it's gonna get down here into the bottom. And I can speed this process up by mending my line in if I want, and I could just do that. That's one way to get my line closer to the shore and closer to that 180-degree off direction if I don't want to cast it. So now I can take and do the same thing again. Great 40-foot cast, no problem. Again, when we mend, get the rod tip high. I drift, and my line is going to wind up downstream again. So let me review that because there were 2 tips in there. One is maybe I just want to cast my line down here. I'm going to cast it right down by the shore, and I can do it again. I can kind of flop it up and I can get it right as close to the bank as I can. The closer I get to the bank, the more out away from myself I can throw. Nice cast, 40-footer out, I'm fishing, no stress. I'm not hung in the trees, that part's really good. So that's a couple of ways to deal with it. Let me review the other tip again, just because I know this is a lot of information coming at you. Due to the wind, I'm going to get a little closer to the microphone. But when I get to the end of my drift, one thing I can do that I fail to see a lot of people do this is, what if I just mend my line in there, Okay, so I mended my line in. Now I can raise my rod up and I can get a very nice cast out with low stress. But that mending my line in gets it more behind me and closer to that angle, which would be 180 degrees is the easiest way to flop a fly up. But a lot of times that results in the fly being too close to you. So get to the end of my drift. I'm just gonna mend over. Great. I'm gonna strip in all the line I don't need, lift my rod up, and make my cast. Wash, rinse, repeat. All day you could wade fish like that. The other thing I want to talk about is just good roll casting technique. And good roll casting technique, generally speaking, and I'm just going to throw some casts towards you, is, and it doesn't matter whether this is upstream or downstream, is my rod, let me just kind of flop my fly out here. My rod should come back a little bit wider like this, then come into my body right here, and then be thrown forward like this. So I'm coming back wide and forward tight to execute a good roll cast. A lot of people try to roll cast with the rod in the same plane, like so, with the rod right here, and you can already see my line just got caught around my rod doing that. So if you suffer from a lot of tangles while roll casting, relatable for a few, I'm sure, try coming back wide and forward tight. And I'm just gonna flop my fly up just to kind of get started. So I've got my roll cast here. I'm gonna come back wide and I'm gonna come forward tight to my body, and I'm gonna get a very efficient roll cast without a lot of tangles. The last tip I'll give you that also I see result in a lot of tangles for folks is trying to roll cast with the fly on one side of their body and the rod on the other. So for instance, if my fly happened to be over here on my left side, if I bring it to my right and try to cast, I'm asking that line to come right across my body, and that's going to result in a lot of tangles. So the fly just has to be on the correct side of my body. So as long as the fly is on my right, I can make a nice roll cast like so, and I can cast on my right. Sometimes there might be a tree or something like that on this side, or maybe there's a crosswind and I want it to be on my left. So if I've got to make a cast off my left because of a tree or a boulder or an obstacle, there's no rules that say I can't just flop my line over to my left, then take the rod over my left shoulder behind the cameraman and throw a roll cast off my left shoulder. So if you just take a deep breath, if you're getting frustrated with roll casting, you know, if it needs to be off my left, I'm just going to flop my fly over here. Now I can take and I can roll cast with the rod tip off my left shoulder. If it needs to be on my right, I can just drag it over to my right like so, back wide, forward tight, and that's a really, really good roll cast with this rod. In fact, I'm just going to throw a couple away from the camera so you can kind of see how that unfurls. Back wide, forward a little tighter to my body, you know, close to 50 feet on the roll cast. That's one of the advantages of these little bit longer rods, especially for when you're wading, you're standing deep in the water, you've got a little bit more lift and a little bit more leverage to throw a roll cast. So when you're out here in the real world and you're not just practicing on the casting lawn, you're going to have brush and trees and grass and all sorts of obstacles behind you to get in your way. So good roll casting technique. It should also be very quiet. If you hear your line ripping through the water, that generally is a bad thing. That means you have a lot of slack. So if I'm going to throw a good roll cast and I have a lot of slack out here like so, I've got to lift that rod to the point where my flies are moving and my line is tight before I make my cast. If you're hearing a lot of noise and a lot of chaos and a little water splashing around during your roll cast, you probably have too much slack in your line. So I hope that helps. If you're going to invest in a quality rod like this or whatever rod that you can afford, try to make the most of it by learning some of those really basic techniques, because when you're out here actually fishing, a lot of the fishing it's going to be in close. We need to have good techniques. We need to have good techniques where we're not spinning our wheels or wasting any time snagged in the bushes behind us. Hey, thanks for following along today. A couple of concluding thoughts on the models of rods and recommended lines. I'll just start with the recommended lines. Based on my experience today, I wouldn't overline these rods. They are very powerful, but I think The Rio Elite Gold XP would be a fine choice for somebody who's throwing hopper droppers, potentially just dries, and then the Rio Elite Gold Max if you are going to be lobbing indicators a good portion of the time. That Rio Elite Gold Max isn't so overpowering that you couldn't throw some light stuff on it, but that's what I'd recommend. Don't overline it. Just 5-on-5, 4-on-4, 6-on-6. That would be just a great match, very easy. But either of those two lines would be great. I wouldn't put a true like Rio Gold, dry fly line on it. I just don't think it would load up effectively enough for a lot of that roll casting action that I think is going to be used by somebody using a 10-foot rod like this, especially for 2-fly rigs and whatnot. I think that little bit heavier line is going to turn over the junk of the trunk. As far as rods go, that 10-foot 4-weight is absolutely killer. I'll run that rod all the time. I think it's a great stick for a variety of different reasons. And I think I might have mentioned this earlier, but if you fish a lot of flies in the smaller range, like down to number 16s, I think that lighter tip on the 4-weight is going to keep fish pinned up on small flies better. And it is an absolutely killer mono rig rod for fishing stonefly nymphs and streamers if you're going to dabble in that tight line mono game, which I think I said this before. If you're serious about getting some fish, I think you would do it. It's a lot of fun. Very, very fun way to fish. And then the 6-weight, I didn't run the 6-weight today, but the 6-weight, that's going to be one of my summer steelhead rods for single-handed fishing. If I go to Alaska, I'd probably grab it to take it to Alaska, or for slinging leeches and sinking lines on lakes. I think that 10-foot 6er would be a great lake rod if you're patrolling around where there's some trophy fish. So anyway, thanks for following along. If you're still watching, like and subscribe, comment, and as always, shop at Reds.